Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start from Afghanistan, where U.S. troops have started leaving the country for the initial troop withdrawal mandated by the Doha Agreement. Under the deal, the U.S. will cut the number of forces in the country to 8,600 from the current 13,000. The spokesperson for U.S. forces in Afghanistan said Washington has begun its conditions-based reduction of forces to 8,600 over 135 days. Colonel Sonny Leggett said the step is being taken in accordance with the U.S.-Afghanistan Declaration and the U.S.-Taliban Agreement. He said the U.S. forces maintain all military means and authority to accomplish its objectives, including anti-ISIS and al-Qaeda operations. The Taliban say they have handed Kabul government a list of 5,000 fighters to be released as part of the prisoner exchange agreed in the Doha deal. In a tweet, spokesperson Sohail Shaheen says the group will only accept individuals mentioned in the provided list. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's Human Rights Commission says they have not been informed about the procedure of the release yet. Earlier, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said he would issue a presidential decree on release of prisoners as the mechanism had been finalized, but the decree has not been issued so far. Meanwhile, the U.S. has denounced the parallel governments in Afghanistan after former Chief Executive Abdullah swore himself in as president in opposition to Ashraf Ghani. Last month, the Election Commission declared Ghani winner in the presidential election, but Abdullah rejected the results. In a tweet, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington strongly opposes any use of force to resolve political differences. Pompeo said all disagreements must be solved through amicable means. The Secretary of State said prioritizing an inclusive government is paramount for peace and the future of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said he will continue to talk to both leaders for an inclusive Afghan government. Khalilzad says both Ghani and Abdullah have said they are open to negotiations to end the political crisis and prioritize peace. In India, activists and civil rights bodies in Assam held a massive rally against the controversial Citizenship Act on Holi. 83 people, mostly Muslims, have been killed in countrywide demonstrations against the law since 11th December. Thousands of civilians carried fire torches in a night rally and burnt a symbolic effigy of the new citizenship law. Women in Delhi also held a rally against the law, demanding its immediate withdrawal. Meanwhile, the all-women sit-in at Shaheen Bagh and Mumbai Bagh continued despite pressure by police and the BJP government. The Indian government has faced strong opposition at both the domestic and international front over this new law. In a related development, despite the High Court's orders, the Uttar Pradesh government has refused to remove name and shame protesters. State police has put up billboards identifying Anti-Citizenship Act protesters in Lucknow and plans to do the same in Meerut. The UP government says it is examining the court orders and evaluating the grounds on which they are being issued. Declaring the posters a violation of the right to privacy, the court has directed the BJP ruled state to remove the banners immediately. Meanwhile, the family of a Kashmiri couple arrested by Indian police said they have been arrested merely for being Muslims. The family said the couple has no link to Anti-Citizenship Act demonstrations and protests. The couple has been charged with sedition, allegedly for instigating demonstrators against the act. China's President Xi Jinping says the coronavirus outbreak has been largely curbed in the country's worst-hit areas. He said this while visiting the quarantined city of Wuhan for the first time since the disease was identified there in December 2019. President Xi said the situation is under control in Hubei province. During the president's trip, authorities eased restrictions for healthy people traveling to low-risk areas. State media reported that Wuhan's 16 makeshift hospitals have also been closed. More on the coronavirus outbreak. The global death toll from the new coronavirus has passed 4,000 after the outbreak spread to over 100 countries with more than 110,000 infections. The Italian government has put the entire country under a lockdown after the COVID-19 cases spiked in all 20 of its regions. Iran has reported 54 new deaths from the virus in the past 24 hours. bringing the overall death toll to 291. This report has more details.
Global hysteria is rising as the novel coronavirus continues to spread across the world. The whole of Italy, a country of some 60 million people, has been placed under quarantine. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has cancelled all public gatherings and asked people to stay at home.
That means that people shall avoid, on the whole territory, to move unless motivated by 3 specific circumstances: important work reasons, urgent necessary reasons, or health reasons.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. This is his first visit to the city since the epidemic began last year. The UN has warned that the outbreak is threatening to become a global pandemic and can cost the world economy up to $2 trillion.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled. The bottom line is, we're not at the mercy of the virus.
In the US, incoming White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has self-quarantined, saying he might have come into contact with an infected person. Elsewhere, Mongolia has barred anyone from entering or leaving its cities for 6 days after reporting its first case of coronavirus.
Moving on to Turkey, which says its forces will patrol to the north of a security corridor being set up in Syria's Idlib province. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said the Russians will patrol the southern part around a highway in Idlib. Cavusoglu said Ankara will retaliate if Syria stages a future attack on its troops. He said the US had offered land, sea and air intelligence on Idlib. Cavusoglu said the Turkish purchase of a Russian air defense system is not an obstacle to Ankara deploying US Patriot missiles. The Russian military says it has escorted 13 Turkish convoys to observation posts in the Idlib de-escalation zone. On March 5th, the presidents of Turkey and Russia announced a ceasefire and joint military patrolling in Idlib, scheduled to begin on Sunday. Turkey has announced it is hosting a summit in Istanbul on 17th March to discuss the migrant crisis unfolding at its border with Greece. Speaking to reporters while returning from Brussels, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the leaders of France, Germany and the UK will attend the summit. He said Turkey is not considering closing its border to Europe for now and that Greece must open its own gates. Erdogan also said the US is softening its stance on a potential sale of US Patriot defense systems to Turkey. He said Washington also asked Ankara to guarantee it will not activate its Russian S-400 defense systems. Meanwhile, Turkey says it has killed 36 militants from the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria and Iraq. The Defense Ministry says the militants died in operations Peace Spring and Euphrates Shield. The ministry said the army killed 18 PKK fighters attempting to infiltrate northern Syrian territories. It said 13 others were killed in an operation in Tel Rifat. The ministry said 5 militants were killed in military operations backed by air power in Iraq's Kandil region. Ankara identifies the PKK group as terrorists and holds them responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year-old conflict. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says the UAE, Jordan and Egypt supplied weapons to the Khalifa Haftar-led Libyan National Army. In a report, the institute said the states provided armored vehicles and military helicopters to Haftar's army over the last 5 years. The report said fighter jets and drones supplied by the UAE had been used in the Libyan civil war during 2019. Instead, no state supplying weapons to Haftar followed the UN arms embargo on Libya. The research institute said the UAE's involvement in Libya is part of its assertive foreign policy. In April last year, Haftar's military launched a campaign to capture Tripoli from the internationally recognized Government of National Accord. Unidentified assailants have killed at least 43 people in raids on villages in northern Burkina Faso. In a statement, the government said the villages Dinguela and Barga in Yetenga province were targeted on Sunday. The statement said 6 other people were hospitalized with injuries. President Roch Marc Christian Kabore announced 2 days of national mourning over the atrocities. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks yet. But tit-for-tat reprisal killings between the Fulani and rival farming communities have surged over the past year across Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. Burkina Faso has been battling a militant insurgency since 2015. Boko Haram militants have killed 8 soldiers in an attack on an army post in Niger's southeastern region of Diffa. The Defense Ministry says 3 others are missing after the attack. The ministry says the post was attacked by 20 heavily armed vehicles. It said the army destroyed the assailants after exchanging fire. The region, which borders Nigeria and Chad, has been repeatedly attacked by the Boko Haram since 2015. Located in the Lake Chad Basin, Diffa is home to 120,000 refugees from Nigeria fleeing the group's violence. The Malaysia's opposition parties have criticized the cabinet named by new Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. Yesterday, Yassin announced a 70-member cabinet, far larger than Mahathir's last 55-member body. Former Minister Khalid Abdul Samad said the lineup will only satisfy the new parties of the governing alliance. His party colleague Salahuddin Ayyub said the size of the cabinet is too big, adding it is not good for the country. Another opposition leader, Fahmi Fadzil, criticized the lack of women in the new cabinet, with only 13% of its membership. Muhyiddin was appointed Malaysia's 8th Prime Minister by the King last week after Mahathir stepped down. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's chief rival Benny Gantz says he has agreed with a smaller party to work to form a new government. The announcement by Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party leader is a new setback for Netanyahu while he struggles to keep power. Gantz said he met the leader of Israel Beitenu party with 7 seats in the new parliament to discuss the chances of forming a new government. In last week's polls, Netanyahu's Likud party and his nationalist allies won 58 seats, 3 short of a majority. Gantz's Blue and White plus left-wing parties won 63 seats in the parliament. Netanyahu's opponents, led by Gantz, control a majority in the Knesset, but deep divisions prevent them from forming a government. In last week's election, Israel's third in less than a year, no party won clear a majority, which only extended 12 months of political deadlock. U.S. Democratic presidential candidates are gearing up for Tuesday's key primary votes in 6 states. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders have been campaigning the key state of Michigan with 125 delegates on offer. Tuesday's Democratic primaries will be the first one-on-one duel between Biden and Sanders since other major candidates dropped out of the race. More in this report.
The race for the Democratic presidential nomination has intensified ahead of today's primaries in 6 states. Michigan is the biggest prize of the 6 that are deciding their choice of Democratic candidate to face off with Donald Trump in November. Most candidates that have dropped out so far have thrown their weight behind ex-Vice President Joe Biden, saying a moderate has the best chance to defeat Trump.
Senator Sanders, as mother would say, God bless him, likes to say we're only going to beat Donald Trump by generating excitement and turnout. Well, guess what? On Super Tuesday, we turned out 70% more voters than ever voted there. And guess what? They voted for us.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is hoping to reboot his campaign after losing 10 out of the 14 states on Super Tuesday. Sanders skipped the plan to campaign in Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois to focus in Michigan. Along the way, he also managed to secure the key endorsement of veteran civil rights leader Jesse Jackson.
We are going to do everything humanly possible to wipe out all forms of discrimination in this country. We are sick and tired of systemic racism in America. We're tired of a wealth gap where white families have 10 times more wealth than black families.
Michigan is a must-win for Sanders, who narrowly won it during his failed 2016 bid for the Democratic nomination. However, Biden, who holds a double-digit lead in the latest state polls, can send Sanders' campaign reeling with a victory.
US President Donald Trump will not be visiting Moscow to mark Victory Day celebrations on 9th May. The Kremlin confirms it received a call from the White House telling it President Trump will not be visiting. Victory Day commemorates Nazi Germany's surrender to the Soviet Union in May 1945. Russian President Vladimir Putin presides over an annual parade on the event, which is usually used to show off Russian military hardware. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the Kremlin does not know who would represent the US at the event. Russia's parliament will vote today on President Vladimir Putin's controversial constitutional amendments. The Kremlin says Putin hopes the amendments will secure the country's political future for decades. In January, Putin began a political storm by proposing changes to the constitution while removing loyal ally Dmitry Medvedev as prime minister. If passed by the parliament, this will be the first major change into Russia's basic law since 1993. Putin is due to step down after his 20-plus-year rule in 2024. The amendments will allow the Russian president to contest another term. The opposition, including prominent leader Alexei Navalny, have criticized the proposals, warning Putin wants to remain leader for life. In Mexico, climate change and water scarcity are forcing farmers to abandon traditional staples like corn in favor of more viable options. Others are giving up farming altogether, selling their fields and leaving their ancestral homelands. More in this report.
Corn has been a symbol of Mexican pride for centuries and formed the backbone of the civilization that gave rise to this country. But its future is now in doubt as climate change and endless droughts transform the Mexican landscape.
We didn't
get the rain that was supposed to fall in June, July, August or September, and that's what we see now. The maize didn't grow because there was no water.
In Puebla State, which is known as the Mexican cradle of corn, cultivation has plummeted by 18%.
We have seen the flora and fauna has changed, and there are longer periods of drought and higher temperatures. During winter, the drops in temperature are harsher, and all that has consequences on the agricultural sector in the region.
Farmers are now turning to less water-intensive crops like pistachio or cactus. Others are selling their fields to real estate developers and looking for other ways to make a living. This phenomenon threatens the country's food supply and is likely to drive up prices of basic essentials.
Hindus in the Pakistani city celebrated the Holi festival. They danced and adorned each other's faces with colored powder. The festival is celebrated as a thanksgiving for a good harvest and to mark the start of spring. This report has details.
Explosions of pink and purple powder, rainbow dust tumbling through the air, faces, hair, hands and clothes rendered in a kaleidoscope of colors. Hindus in Pakistan took to the streets to celebrate Holi, one of the world's most photogenic religious festivals. On the eve of the festival, large pyres were lit to signify the burning of evil spirits.
We celebrate this festival of colors so that the lives of all of us are filled with happiness and joy, and life must go on. The concept of Holi is victory of good over evil and bringing joyfulness in human lives.
Hindus form the biggest minority community in Pakistan. According to official estimates, 7.5 million Hindus live in the country.
Being a Pakistani, I feel immensely happy that as a Hindu, I don't encounter any problems and that we have full rights here and we celebrate our each festival in a free and befitting manner.
Although the festival finds its origins in South Asia, it has now gained popularity across the world. This year in India, coronavirus fears dampened some Holi celebrations as the number of colour buyers has decreased by at least 50%. This is because some are concerned the colours used for Holi were being imported from China.
South Korea and Japan have begun a fresh round of trade talks despite ongoing diplomatic quarrel. Seoul said countries conducted a Director General level video conference after enacting border blockades because of the new coronavirus outbreak. South Korea's DG for International Trade Policy, Lee Hoo-hyun, attended the video conference while his counterpart, Yoichi Leader, represented Japan. The meeting is expected to run through today's afternoon. In December, a meeting in Tokyo broke up without any progress. The trade dispute began in July last year after Japan restricted chip and display industries exports to Seoul. In response, Seoul removed Tokyo from its list of its trusted partners and sought mediation from the World Trade Organization. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.